Come on, second time.
That's true.
Yeah, got to get him in before I'm out for another month.
But not chasing you too this time.
Ooh, fermenta says you don't have to put that stuff in. I never rehydrated any of those
beer
yeasts.
here.
Here.
We got a lot of beer right down here. Open up one of those crowlers.
You ready to get like acid reflux?
Yes, please.
Do you have the gourd?
Gird your loins.
Here, McGeard.
Gird.
Sweet beers.
McGird, this is
Look
going
at
to be a
that.
sour turd.
You guys ready for the fruit smoothie beer?
Yeah.
Juice.
There's plenty there.
Make sure Mikey gets some in his tiny cup. That's almost as small as our bar.
There it is.
Welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio, coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City, Texas. You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with all your friends.
In this episode, we have our friends from the Collective Brewing Project back in studio with us to discuss what they've been up to recently and to help discuss making additions to your beer to change that flavor profile. It's most often fruit and wood, but we hope to branch out into a few other interesting areas, and lately the Collective has been catching some nationwide notoriety for their experiments. Then later in the show, we're going to have a phone-in discussion with Josh Noel, beer writer for the Chicago Tribune and author of the recently released Barrel-Aged Stout and Selling Out, Goose Island, Anheuser-Busch, and how craft beer became big business. If you've listened to our show at all, you know that we have an interest in the effect big beer buying into craft breweries has had on the industry, and this book fully describes the first of those buyouts. So pour yourself a pint of your favorite beverage and kick back because tonight's show should be full of all the interesting.
You did say it.
You made
but,
me.
But before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio, we have a variety of options for you to help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. Also, every live show will have a giveaway, and all our patrons at the end of the month get for all our patrons at the end of the month, and we'll be doing a month. Never mind.
And you write this.
I know, I swear. For all our 10, 20, and $5, $10, and $20 patrons. Also,
Amateur
a big
hour.
thanks to Mike Hoover and Jamie Estrada for your patronage.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you guys.
Is
very
that
much.
our new one? We got one like
We got
a couple days ago.
3 new in the last month. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesomeness.
All right,
Thanks,
I'm Brandon.
everyone. I'm Greg.
I'm Mikey B.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Stubby.
I'm James.
I'm Zane the Wizard.
BZ Twee.
All right.
Twee, you know me.
Well, it's a
Evil
beautiful
and
day to be
timid
alive
to
and
the
well
count of
at
three.
Come and Brew It Radio.
Alive.
Mikey's
have
almost
got-
there.
Well, I'm working towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't recognize the horse gentleman in the corner there, that's Mikey.
Sorry.
Yeah. We've got a packed show tonight. Lots of stuff. Lots of
we
really
do.
interesting things to talk about. We're going to have to try and keep it on an even keel. I've got a glass of marmalade here that I'm going to start working on.
Blackberry raspberry jam.
It's good. Actually, it's really good.
Did you take your diabetes medication today? 'Cause
I
you'll
did,
need it
actually,
after
yes.
that one. Let me get the beatus.
I got that sugar, yo.
Super crushable.
Did I put my mic right in front of the camera?
Oh, yeah. It's
Well,
ruined.
Anyway.
There you go. Now we can see your
the
ugly
mount
face.
doesn't work anymore. It doesn't stay. It gets all
You
droopy.
broached it.
We need Mike Viagra. Not Mikey Viagra, Mike Viagra.
You won't need that with James. His
But
voice.
All right, so we got a lot of things to get into tonight. I finally get to be here on a night when Collective is in the studio. This
I
is
know
what,
you've been
probably
waiting.
the 4th time, I think, and it's at least the 3rd.
We can actually have a
Yeah,
debate about
this-
sweatpants like face to face on the air as opposed
Well,
to them
we did
bringing shit
that.
up.
We did that at Bluebonnet, actually. And we, if I remember right, we discovered that it's all these troublemakers around
Exactly.
here that really have the issue with it. It's not you and I.
Sweatpants are only appropriate at strip clubs.
Or on brew days, apparently.
In the comfort of one's own kitchen.
Or a strip club.
Or
strip club
one's
kitchen.
own strip club.
Yeah, if you have a strip club in your kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this. I guess we're going to start here with our first segment, all right?
Yeah,
we-
recent happenings.
Okay.
We don't have anything for that.
Okay, all right.
No bumper for that.
Too bad we didn't
We're
talk
going to
about
surprise you
this yet,
tonight, yeah.
So the first thing we got on here, I'm really happy to see. This is something we've talked about for a long time on the show. We've had Kevin from Fermentus in here a couple of times. And
Oh
he's
yeah,
talked
but
about it,
that's no, we're not talking about that yet.
Kevin from
we're not
Fermentus.
talking about that yet?
Yeah, that's
It's the
that's
first
my
thing
segment.
on the list.
I know, but
Oh,
we
that's
changed
your
that.
Oh,
man.
okay.
All right, so forget what we just said.
I don't know. Maybe once
Right,
we've
then-
done,
then you're
maybe
now
once
skipping
we've done
the-
this show a couple of times.
Skipping
we'll-
the
Yeah,
bullet
we've
out.
we've only practiced 120 times,
Yeah, not very much.
so no.
Not 100.
Now you're going to bullet 3.
Okay, so we're going to 3. We're
Yeah.
skipping over 2, going to 3, which is Beersmith 3, which is now available.
It's
which
now
is-
available.
I'm very
As of
excited
this
about
week,
that.
yeah.
If you haven't seen it on any of your social media or emails or whatever, Beersmith 3 was released today, and it's got a bunch of new features in it. You can do mead and cider in it, which is really cool.
I'm glad to see that.
I tried doing that in
Yeah.
the past and just couldn't get it to work, so I'm glad to see that. It's also
They
got
just didn't have. You could put honey in a beer, and it just didn't reflect gravity. It didn't
Yeah.
reflect anything appropriately, and they're supposed to have it, reflect it exactly how it's
Well,
supposed
even
to
with
be.
the nutrient additions and whatnot.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
it
you can
was
do the whole
Tansa
nutrient addition schedule.
calculator,
Yeah, you can do all that, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then also they've made the pH adjustment tool and the water adjustment
Water,
tool and all
yeah.
that. You can put that in your recipe actually. So when you pull up your session tab like you've done in the past, it'll say here's where you're going to do your water additions, and when you mash in, it'll tell you here's your pH adjustment and all that, which I use a lot.
I like
So-
the idea for the temperature adjustment for Whirlpool hops
Yes,
Yeah.
and what
yeah.
that's going to actually give to you.
Mhm.
For
Yeah, you can
IBUs and
assign a
whatnot.
temperature and a time to your
Yeah.
Whirlpool, if I'm not mistaken. So
Oh,
you have
cool.
better hop utilization
Mhm.
calculations, which is nice.
That's
Because that's
been very
always
vague
a
for a long
guessing
time.
game, really. Yeah.
And when people use as many hops as they do now for as many styles. So.
Yeah.
10 pounds per barrel.
Well, even if you're not doing the late
What are
hop editions,
hops?
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
even
guys
if you're
brew
not
with hops?
even if
threw
you're
a
not doing the
pellet
late
in.
hop editions, even your 10-minute edition or something like that, your regular standard editions, those are still
Just wasn't-
isomerizing in the Whirlpool until
Yes.
it gets down below 180. So this will now calculate that, and that's nice because I think calculating that bitterness balance is one of the most difficult things to do. You really have to kind of do it over and over again and get a feel for it. So this will help make it a little more exact. I'm really looking forward to this. The nice thing about it too is that if you are a gold level subscriber or above, which I am, so if you want
Yeah.
more than 10 recipes in the cloud,
Yeah.
you're already a gold level subscriber, then you've already got a license sitting in your account. You just log in and it's there and you download
Oh.
it, and you've got two licenses to use already. So you don't have to go out and buy it
Excellent.
separately. If you are not and you're wanting to upgrade, you don't have to, by the way. That was one of the things I saw several people talking about on Facebook. They were upset. Great, now I have to upgrade. Well, no, you don't. If you don't want to, you can keep using two.
For such an expensive upgrade. Like
Yeah,
$20
it's $10 a
or
year.
$10, yeah.
It's $10.
Yeah,
so
they stopped the $20 or $30
Even originally,
flat fee.
though.
Now it's
Right.
$20 for something that this many people
Yeah.
use.
Right. So it's 80 cents a month or something like that. So if you can't afford that, quit brewing. You know.
Well, all right, we're done. We've been
So-
using Beersmith for years. It's great stuff.
I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
love it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Excellent app.
One of the things I like about it is you can get as complicated or as simplistic with it as you want. You can use it just as a basic recipe database and kind of a design tool if you want, all the way up to inventorying all your ingredients and
Yeah.
putting costs in and everything. If you want to get
Yeah.
as nerdy as you want with it, you can. I don't generally do that, so I'm pretty basic with it, but it's very accurate, being able to calculate color and gravities and that kind of thing. So, technical difficulties.
What is that?
The internet.
Brandon's getting really choked up over Beersmith.
Yeah,
That's
I
all it
am.
is.
It's just that I'm so emotional.
I'm just going to quit moving.
All right.
Evidently, I moved and something didn't like it.
So I
there
guess
you
I
go.
could
Well,
actually
and
read
you gotta
You
update
get to hear my emails tonight. So anyway,
All night long.
So at any rate, I'm excited about that. I think it's just another great addition to what's already a fantastic product. If you've ever had any interactions with Brad at Beersmith, you'll know that he stands behind his product, and it's a really
Yeah.
quality piece of software that he puts out. I just can't say enough good things
He
about
actually
it,
Skyped
so.
into our last club meeting for
He did?
Cabanera.
You
So,
if you have an
good
issue and you
presentation.
email like the contact box, it's Brad that emails you back and
gets
he
right
walks
back
you
to you.
through everything you need to do. So it's really nice to have that level of service from that kind of product. So
All right.
yeah.
So we move into our next segment with the one for Stubby.
Yeah, Stubby.
And now, We don't want you to get the shaft, so here's just the tip from Stubby.
Love it.
That was a lot creepier than I thought.
I feel really violated right now.
Wow.
Sorry, that was kind of loud.
I love it.
Super aggressive.
This is
So-
my first time here. Is that normal?
Yeah.
Totally.
So anyway, we're the tip tonight was actually Brandon started it earlier, but that was because I kind of
Brandon likes tips.
Hey, I just
Yeah.
go by what's written on the page.
I know there's all
Like
kind
Ron
of stuff
Burgundy.
written on there that we decided to omit and all that stuff, but for years I thought this was kind of interesting because we had talked about this and we just got validated this week because Fermentus actually said to don't rehydrate your yeast, just pitch it directly in. So
In writing.
in
to
writing,
everybody, yeah.
So there for a long time, they just said rehydrated and all that stuff. But Kevin from Fermentus actually said, for years that just pitch it in, you're only going to lose about 5% viability. So
They took it a step further actually with the written release too, because Kevin had talked about viability loss and that kind of thing. You've always heard the osmotic pressure of the wort would stress out the yeast, and you would lose. What was it? 20 or 30% that was the common knowledge before?
no, he said 5% viability.
No,
but
I
now
mean
that's-
before what
okay.
Palmer had written in
Oh,
the
yeah,
Brewer, something was like 20 or 30%.
They
And
acted like you'd lose almost half.
Kevin had said that in their studies in the lab, they had come up with 3 to 5%, which is a negligible difference, really. And they even went a step further, and they analyzed the beer after it had fermented to make sure that there weren't any fusels or extra esters or anything that's given off. And they went as far as to say that your finished product is actually no different. So they did a full lab analysis of the beer and said that there's no difference whatsoever between rehydrating and pitching dry, which is great as far as I'm concerned.
I know homebrew wise and commercially wise, when we use their product, we never rehydrated even when we would use it.
They validated what we were already doing, despite the standard knowledge.
Well, the cool guys have known this for a long time. We all know that. This
No.
this is just letting the squares in on the secret. So
The lazy guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lazy guy.
First time I remember hearing Westlake talk about rehydrating, I was like, you're taking a lot more steps from something that's supposed to not have that many steps. That's the whole point of the dry yeast, is you don't
Exactly.
do a lot.
I think he likes as many extra steps as you can get. Like
Yeah.
I think if he thought you could rehydrate it and then dehydrate it and then rehydrate it again, that he would do that just to have another thing to do.
For all the times that he brews.
Yeah.
Yeah, he spends more time building his system than he does his actually brewing. So. He's not here to defend himself. So,
Yeah.
That's right.
and I know he doesn't listen to us, so he can kiss my ass. So,
All right.
Yeah.
So that moves us on to our next segment.
Here it comes.
Are you ready?
No one asked for our opinion, but we're giving it anyway. It's time for unsolicited answers to internet questions.
Again, that came across a little creepier than I thought it was going
Do you
to.
guys just find a bunch of homeless people around here and just have them record stuff?
You would think.
yes.
There is the option. I mean,
But anyway, so what are the questions here, Brandon?
All right, so I didn't read through this all the way. I just started to, and I got stuck at one point. So,
You'll figure out why.
so our question here is: I feel like I'm missing out on some background. I last brewed a saison sometime around the time I read Farmhouse Ales, which was like 4 years ago. It was a pumpkin saison. I tried it recently. It was not good in the traditional sense.
Because it has pumpkin in it.
I recently threw down the saison brewing gauntlet, and I could use some help. It seems like there are tons of saison yeast. All the grains are game. Spices sometimes come into play. Weird fermentation temperatures. You name it, saison's got it. Homebrewers, let's see. They all seem to disagree about pretty much everything: grain bill, yeast, and fermentation scheme. Any grand unifying theory and tried and true recipes, things from the matrix I plug into my brain would be greatly appreciated.
I feel like this guy's nailed it.
Yeah.
He knows saison brewing.
yeah, he's already on
He's
top
got
of it,
it.
right?
You know, that's
What's the question?
what he's confused about is the beauty of saison is
Yeah.
that it's such a broad style. in terms of ingredients that go into it, and
Oh,
brewing
yeah.
styles and that kind of thing. It's a wide open.
That's
palette,
why we like
know?
it.
Yeah, totally. It's
Yeah,
a good canvas for a lot of things you want to do.
I think there are very few requirements to brew a saison. I think you've got to have some saison yeast character in there, whether
Yeah,
you
it does
call
have
that
to have the yeast dominance.
farmhouse
more
or
or less. But-
horse blanket or any of those odd
And I think
descriptors.
you'll still have a yeast dominance even with a lot of. You could have more or less hop character, and still have that yeast character that really defines it with the dryness.
But did I get that wrong though? What are they saying? Pumpkin?
Yeah, pumpkin. He said pumpkin.
Oh,
yeah.
this kind of pumpkin beer is the one I'm pouring out
I love pumpkin beers. You're
in the
crazy.
drain. No, they're
I'll drink
terrible.
pumpkin beers all day.
Your pumpkin spice latte saison.
Ooh.
That sounds disgusting.
And then the other
Drink it
thing,
in your
for a
Uggs.
saison, it's got to be dry and
Right.
it's got to have
Totally.
good carbonation. And other than that, that's the beauty of it. Is it's a playground. It could be dark, it could be light, it could be high in alcohol, it could be real low in alcohol. It can have all kinds of different grains in it. I would say, if there's a rule in grain, I would stay away from caramel malts.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah,
Well,
you're going to
no,
kill your
but-
dryness and
Right.
the refreshing quality they're supposed to have.
Ryan said it right. They're real good canvases for additions.
Yeah.
That's why the collective uses that base so much. Is they're kings of all kinds of funky stuff, and a saison is open to fruit, spices, and all the random things you could throw into a beer. So that's what's fun about them too. You see, I'm turned around on a lot of saisons now from like 2-3 years ago.
This is true.
Or 4
Yeah.
or 5
Oh,
months
man.
ago, really. I mean, it hasn't been that long ago. I think there's a lot better saisons
Right,
out
yeah,
there now
it's-
than there used to be.
We've got better ingredients, better yeast now, better. There's better.
I think it's a better understanding.
That's what I was
really,
gonna say.
that-
We have better understanding of well, my beer didn't turn out, so I'm just gonna call it a saison versus I brewed a saison.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has a lot of phenolic off character.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It was supposed to be a pale ale, but I'm going to go ahead and call this
Yeah.
a saison and just go with it. Yeah.
I think there's an understanding too that the esters that are given off by saison yeast create a sweetness, and so you have to make sure that you dry it out and you hop it
Right.
correctly
Dry as
to
hell.
make sure that it doesn't have a perceived sweetness. I've had ones that were 1002, or half Plato, that tasted sweet. And
Yeah.
it's just because the esters in the yeast kind of lend themselves to that, and I think just more people understand that now, and they're brewing drier, more drinkable
Sure.
saisons instead of heavier ones like you tend to have.
Didn't you also have something that went like below zero? I could have sworn we drank some rye saisons of yours that were bone dry
Yeah.
that were phenomenal.
Yeah, like 99, 0. Yeah, I've got one right now that went down to 0.
Yeah, I've
it
had
was
several.
the big brew from my house, actually. A couple people were complaining about it. That was only a 1048 beer. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's going to go down to 0. That's still 6 1/3%. It's a lot. So,
That's a good sweet spot, too. Like, we were talking about the perceived sweetness.
mhm.
You want to get away from that alcohol warmth
Yes.
that can trick your sweetness, palate
Yeah.
into thinking it's sweet, too. So.
And that's kind of a mistake I've made in the past where I brewed a bigger beer and didn't realize it was going to go down to 0, and then I have a 9% saison on it.
Right.
It's fun to go brew on those days over at Brandon's house because then you watch Brandon get hammered.
Oh, yeah. When you're brewing at home, that's what you do, right? I mean,
But the
no need to Uber to the bedroom.
good thing about something like that, even though it probably hit 9%, is like you might taste it, you might not, but it's still probably a very drinkable beer.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it
that was
is
a
so
good beer.
dry. It's got a lot of good character to it, and it's crushable.
Yeah.
More or less.
Crushable.
It crushes you
You know,
afterwards.
listen,
I really hate that term.
First you hit me
I know.
with all the interesting, and now you drop a crushable on
I'm
me,
trying
dude?
real hard.
Ah.
It's like using moist in a. Oh wait, no. What's juicy?
Juicy.
Nothing like
Ah.
a good juicy.
Are you about to use the word
saison.
dank to describe hops too?
Yeah, dank saison. That's
Juicy
the
booty.
next one.
We are
Juicy
brewing.
booty.
We do have a saison going with 3 stars in DC that is both juicy and dank.
Nice.
So,
Juicy
sorry.
and dank.
It's deucey.
So it's deuce.
Juicy.
It's a New England style saison.
Gross.
Really.
I'm down.
So enjoy. Or
Let me ask you
If you're
guys
in
this.
DC.
Actually, sorry, just to jump in real quick, but curious because I never heard of this until we started talking to the guys at 3 Stars about this. When they run out of their boil kettle through the heat exchanger and go into their tank, they are already dry hopping their beer before it even starts fermenting. There are already hops in that tank. Have you guys ever tried this at home?
I don't
Anybody?
know what the point of that would be.
Wait,
Uh,
okay, so
we're-
say that
Bio
again.
Hoppiness.
transformation.
Like literally,
Yeah.
you just have your hops in your fermenter waiting for your finished wort to come in before you even pitch yeast. It's going in at the same time as you're pitching yeast. They're dry hopping.
yeah. Super.
See, I've heard of doing it
See
like 2 or
that.
3 days into fermentation, so you can get some of the, you're getting those polyphenols to stay in solution. But
And also
Right,
the
right, but-
biotransformation
Right,
aspect of it.
right.
Yeah.
But-
I never heard of doing it prior to.
like
I
run off dry hopping, that's it's kind
Hey,
of weird.
don't think
If we
that's
had-
their standard practice.
Yeah. If we had Alex, I'm sure he could tell us.
Oh yeah,
They're working their way all the way back to mash hopping.
I mentioned it to Alex, though, and even he was kind of like, "Wait, what?"
Oh, really?
This was something we were just kind of. They said they were, I guess, a little intimidated by how weird we get. So,
had to try to come up
we
with
were
something
drinking
weird?
at someplace in Nashville during CBC. The night I was supposed to meet up with you, Brandon, and sorry, and they were like, "Fuck it, let's just put them in the fermenter." I was like, "Will that work?" And they're like, "I don't know, let's figure it out." And then we did it. We made it into a big beer. So we'll see how it goes. It's like 3 days with Brett on the hops, and then we're pitching saison yeast 3 days in. So I don't know. It's
The
a
next
whole
thing's
thing.
going to be putting hops in your hot liquor tank.
You guys
Room
don't
with
do
hop
that?
water.
Right.
Yeah, get those
I like where your
pre-IBU'd.
head's at, Brandon.
I think that should be an experiment.
I'm.
Kidding.
Something tells me that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, pre-IBU'd water.
IBU water. We'll see that on the
Ooh,
shelves
yeah.
pretty soon, too.
Man. TM the Collective Brewing Project in collaboration with
Slash-
2018.
slash Come Over Radio.
Some guy's going to ride up on a penny farthing bike with a big handlebar mustache and a top hat on. I only drink IBU water.
I really want to.
It's
see
happening now. Yeah, it's happening.
All right, so we're going to talk about the key lime pie beer.
All right. Yeah. Next segment, experimental beers. I got enough for everybody to share.
So last show we did Chris's and my experimental beers, and this is yours. What were the ingredients that you got?
Well, this is actually
This is, yeah.
a side.
Oh, this
experimental
isn't
beer.
this
Side
isn't the
project.
challenge beer. This is
Well, by the time that this comes out on audio and whatnot, we'll already have it out there. But this is our Martin
Yeah,
House
audio
beer.
line.
Nigel and I. Yeah, we've already won.
Are we poisoning the judging pool?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Nigel and I brewed this as part of the Martin House Riverside Shootout. We did one test batch for this, which I think we might have discussed on the show before. Mainly, we started off with the concept of Berliner Weiss, thinking, well, they've been doing a lot of quick souring over there, and we thought, let's take advantage of that. And then we went in the
Well, 'cause-
direction of saying, let's do something different and maybe use some lactose and fruit of some sort, whatever. And it came out to turning into a key lime pie type of beer is what we're aiming at here.
So previously for the shootout, they limited us to their yeast, and it had been their saison yeast and then their American ale yeast. And then last year they had dropped the saison yeast, so you were left with just their American ale yeast, and then it was their hops. And so this year I think it was their hops, but they added some additional, and then it was any yeast you wanted to use.
right. It's much more
it-
broad and open.
Yeah.
And who knows? We may turn this in and they'd be like, well, we really weren't thinking that, for all we
Right.
know. But we thought, let's just do something different than we've done before. And nobody's been souring anything for this competition that we know of. So,
I think some of us had thought about it for the competition, but knowing that they do some fast sours, some kettle souring, and I talked to him about it, but he'd never said yes or no.
right.
Do it. And so now with this open yeast format, it really opens the door for allowing the people in the competition to do that. So
Right. So, what you're looking at with this, I mean, more or less a Berliner style recipe with some added specialty malt to try to get a little bit of graham crackerness in it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of that. Lactose, pound of lactose per 5 gallons, lime peel in the boil, and then key lime juice. And because I didn't have a chance to actually find some vanilla beans recently, it's got some vanilla extract added to the keg. So
What'd you
Yeah.
use for the character malts? Like
it was the Swan honey biscuit was that was the only specialty that we added in.
Which
Everything
we're not
else is
able to get
Pilsner
right
and
now.
wheat, so just like a typical Berliner recipe. It's a little stronger, geared more towards like 5.5%, I think.
Well, you know,
and then we quick soured with Good Billy. So
you could do the Breeze Cara Brown and get some of that.
right.
Yeah, we've
that-
used that before.
Yeah, some of that graham crackery flavor.
But I mean, the fact that I was looking for the lactose, it's the first time I've tried that, anything quick soured and whatnot. And I thought, yeah, it was good with one. I found key lime juice and ready to go. I dialed that back some. I dialed back a lot of the additions just in case, you know.
We actually have this same beer in barrels right now in our brewery.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you brewing that whenever we were talking about doing this, and then we on Facebook we were bouncing that. So
Yeah, we have 2 wine barrels with key lime juice and vanilla, and like we didn't use any specialty malts like that. We did use lactose though.
right. And then we actually used more than that, and still it seems very dry to me. It came out clean. This is
I think it's 100% spot on. I had it before we started the show, and it tastes exactly like what it's supposed to taste like to me.
Yeah, this is spot on. Like this is really good.
I could sit around
Thanks.
the pool and drink this.
yeah, and that's what
Anybody
we're
got
thinking.
some Rolaids? I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, you should have pre-gamed if you're really worried about that,
You
man.
don't walk around with them in your pocket?
No.
Look at a
That's
sour
not a
beer,
roll
you
of
get
I'm
a-
surprised we don't have like a vending machine in here.
I hope I don't end up like that first sour night. That was
going to be
that-
waking up with
that's-
nightmares and burning ass.
What's
That-
wrong, Stubby? Is our sour IPA too sour for
That's
you?
pretty sour.
It's good.
No,
Yeah,
the,
really good.
here this should have been Stubby's tip. Don't ever eat pepperoni pizza and then drink a bunch of sour beer.
And jalapenos, too.
Oh my God, I
Yeah.
nearly died that night, man. I mean, I was sleeping upright in the lazy boy on it, and acid was like gushing in my throat like a fire hose. It was pretty rough.
Oh man,
I still
Gushing
remember
in
one
your
of
throat
one of
like
my
a fire
favorite
hose.
moments in my
Yeah.
entire life was the BJCP course, and we got the sour beer that night, and everybody was like, "Oh, I can't handle this. I can't handle this." Brandon and I were like, "Just give us more. Give us more."
Yeah, we drank all of it.
And I drank so much sour beer that night that I'd never had the experience before of waking up at 3 a.m. with my stomach in knots, and I was like, "What is happening? I don't understand my life."
But you followed it and you went all the way through with it after.
True,
right.
yeah.
Right,
No,
just
I
power
mean,
through.
well, I've learned a lot of lessons. Like when we went to Fooder for Thought down in Florida, I was like, "Oh, it's all sour and farmhouse ales. Cool. I'm gonna eat like 5 Rolaids throughout the day before we even get there. Just line the stomach with chalk before I even go in. You got to pregame these things."
Yes.
yeah.
Got to plan
You're
ahead.
a pro, you know.
Yeah.
Stubby didn't plan ahead for tonight, I guess, so it's going to be one of those
You knew
no.
lazy boy nights.
You knew who was showing up too.
I know, man.
We brought
It's always the
one,
way, though.
sour
I
beer,
think
right?
I think I actually have some in the truck, so
Did I not stick Urban?
I'll be hitting
There's
that
no
at
Urban
halftime.
Funkhouse. We brought only sour beer. There are no saisons.
Oops,
Oh,
I meant to bring
man,
a
and that was
Saison
my
for you.
favorite one.
Or Hooray for Me, or
I
Brett,
love
New
I
England
love
style
the Urban
IPA.
Funkhouse. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Ours too.
Is it?
naturally we didn't bring it.
Actually, it's not a joke. Everybody who works at the brewery, that's our favorite beer.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that
That's
the only
awesome.
one you can drink without injuring yourself anymore?
It's still 7.5% when you drink enough of
No,
it.
I mean, it doesn't wear away the lining of your
It
stomach.
definitely tends to get the
We
job
have-
done when you least expect it.
It's a clutch creeper right there. Insane. Good job, buddy.
All right, so let's move on to talking about Collective Brewing Project. It's been quite a while since we had y'all in here, or since they had y'all in here.
Too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to? You've made some headlines on a couple different fronts in the last year or so here.
Yeah,
yeah,
we,
they were talking about getting weird, so you know.
we do weird stuff. I guess that gets attention. We don't do it to get attention, but it's a nice side effect. So, last summer we went semi-viral for our noodle beer, cup of beer, and then
The ramen noodle beer, yeah.
Yeah, 288 packages of Maruchan ramen noodles in that one. And then we did a glitter beer with Peeps. I think the Peeps pissed everybody off, so it got shared everywhere.
It wasn't.
And
It
it was
was.
purple.
It wasn't the. It wasn't the glitter. It was just the Peeps.
Probably just the Peeps. Well, yeah, I don't know. It was-
No,
got
we
so
definitely
much-
got hate from a lot of people.
Let me put it this way: the glitter was a lot more frustrating on the production end.
Yeah, I bet.
Right.
Yeah, Peeps were easy. Those things float and eventually just dissolve in the boil kettle. Getting glitter into beer was way more challenging than we thought it was going to be.
Ben came up with a glitter gun to like shoot it into the kegs, and then they had to be moved over. And we
You going to
kegged
market
the
that to
beer.
strip clubs?
Yes.
with some
Yeah.
sweatpants
That's a good idea.
to go with it. So
Glitter sweatpants.
I just
Selective Brewing.
I think of like Ghostbusters 2, and they're spraying the foam. That's what I see is just spraying the glitter all over everybody.
So see, this is what you can do now, though. You say, "Honey, I swear to God, I hadn't been at the strip joint.
I've
I was
been
just
to
drinking that
Collective.
collective, drinking
That
that
was
The
beer,
best part is
and I just spilled it on myself."
Well, then explain the sweatpants.
Exactly. Why are you
injecting
wearing
the glitter into
sweatpants
these kegs? Like Ben had to take off, and James stepped in, and anytime he'd engage one of the kegs and turn on the CO2 and flush the glitter into the keg, every time you disengage the coupler, a little bit of glitter would spurt out, and he had his hands on it, and then every single time he'd put his hand up to his forehead and wipe his sweat back, and I just kept on laughing. I held it back, but by the time he was done, his face was just completely covered in glitter, like by the end of it, and just
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was sitting there at the bar after I went to the bathroom, and I was just like looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, I really meant to tell my wife, like, I swear to God, I was at work all day. I didn't go to eat like a lunch buffet somewhere because it looks so bad.
Did she buy it?
You know my wife.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course she didn't buy it. She doesn't believe me about anything. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I want to go back to the cup of beer because
Yeah.
the first time that y'all did that, the cup of beer is the ramen beer that he was talking about earlier. The first time that y'all did it, I tasted it and it wasn't my thing. And I mentioned it to somebody before, and they said, you have to go back and taste it again. And I went back and had it recently, and you've got it dialed in now. It's really an excellent beer. I like that one a lot. It doesn't taste like a bowl of ramen, but there's ramen in there. I don't know if it's got some sort of a character to it that just
Noodle
reminds
character?
you
It's
of
the
it.
broth spicing. I mean, Ryan came up with a really good recipe for the ideas of what we'd put into it.
It's the broth spicing. Yeah, it was just like a drunken idea I had that was a joke, and they looked at me like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" When I came back from California, it was like, "We should make beer with noodles because it'd be funny." And then we got locked into making it. This year, like since the first year we put it out, we added lime juice and the lime zest, so I think you get a rounder lime character.
Okay.
Up the ginger a little bit, and everything's up a little bit. But mostly it's just like a Goza recipe with 50 pounds of noodles instead of 50 pounds of wheat. But there is also wheat in it. But
Right.
yeah, it's just
Wheat or weed?
yes, yes, wheat.
I mean, sorry.
I work on the fire department.
So you said that you came back and everybody thought you were crazy. Is there any idea that comes up now that anybody thinks anybody is crazy for? I mean, have you reached a point where it's like, well, yeah, that might as well happen?
They looked at me funny when I suggested the Coolicle beer we did last week.
I looked at you funny when you said, let's put pickles in the keg. That's when I was like, I'd rather just do juice. That's when I was a little too iffy on that. But honestly, though, the best thing about our place when we work there is there's meetings where literally when you're done having all the ideas, Ryan just goes, all right, now let's hear the really weird shit ideas. Like, let's get crazy stupid with these ideas. And then Coolicle beer comes out.
Which is, describe it.
Tropical. So we did 2 kegs because we roasted a pig. So don't think we put this into a production batch. This was 2 sixtels of beer. I went to Walmart and did where I do all my fine spice shopping for the brewery, and got like 20 packages of Kool-Aid, 10 tropical punch, and 10 watermelon. And we got the Fort Worth, best made pickles, the ones that are like chunked up pretty good.
Yeah, keep it local.
Yeah, keep local.
Right.
So we drained the juice out of an 80 ounce jar of pickles, and we took the spear out of the keg. And so in goes the Kool-Aid, the pickle juice, and like half a jar of the pickles in a sock. Sorry, Zane. Because he cleans most of the cakes.
Oh, I thought it was his sock.
No, he's going to have to...
Yeah, two socks.
He's going to take the spear out and pull the shit out.
That's how we get the funk. Yeah, then we filled it with Petite Golden Sour. So...
Okay.
So would I be correct in assuming that most of these ideas come from the people who don't clean the kegs out?
Yes.
The guy is like, hey, why don't we make a bitter?
to be completely honest with you, most of the ideas that we have now, we all kind of go, no, let's not do that. It's ones where we've tried something and realized just how hard it is to get coconut flavor into a beer and what we have to go through to do it. And that's when now where we're going, coconut does sound like a really good flavor. However, do you not remember having to clean that tank and kegging the beer and how much we lost whenever we couldn't figure out how to get coconut flavor into it, and we just went loose with the coconut and everything went bad.
Dealing with a coconut in the first place to add it to the beer a lot of times is a pain. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
A lot of it is like weighing out. Like I'm willing to have them do a lot of work.
Hey, let me put it this way: pickles are no problem. It's just the glitter that worries me. That's.
Yeah, he's got PTSD over the glitter.
I understand that. I used to paint if you paint Metaflake type paint, man, your whole shop is just full of glitter.
Oh,
and then if you paint anything black, oh, what the hell? There's red glitter in there, just floating in your shop or something somewhere. So I understand that. It's going to be everywhere.
What do they say that glitter is the herpes of craft supplies? It never quite goes away.
That's true.
Actually,
we have a no
it's
glitter
called
policy.
disco dust.
It is called disco dust. We have a no glitter policy for our private parties because with the first month we were open, we had one, and some of that glitter is still in the tap room. Like I'll find it in the cracks or embedded in the wood of the tables and stuff. It just won't go away.
All right, so where's a camera? All right, put my camera on here. We're going to show.
We pulled the spear when we went to clean it, and that's what Zane found inside the keg.
Nice.
Wow.
That's
And
glitter?
there was still glitter all inside the keg washer, even when we were done with just spraying all that out.
Imagine.
You can't not have it everywhere.
Does it stay in solution at all? I mean, I would
This one-
imagine
this
that
one
they'd have
does.
to shake the keg. I don't.
Yeah, we stored them upside down, Hefeweizen kegs. So they got sold upside
Right.
down, and then they tapped
Okay.
right side up. It still within a day or two, it would clear up.
Right.
I'd say it was mostly
just start
clear.
to drop out.
And to me,
Yeah.
it looks more like pearl than it does glitter. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially that stuff that BSG is carrying. It looks
Looks like soft soap.
pearlescent, inappropriately.
Yeah.
We didn't use that stuff.
Oh, okay. You just went to a Walmart, got the glitter.
I spent a lot of money on Amazon. So.
So let's
man.
get to actually talking about how you go about doing these beers, because there's a few different considerations besides just what you're putting in the beer. The base beer is where you start, and you all have kind of a set of base beers that you use. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the one most people are familiar with, if you're familiar with us, is our Petite Golden Sour. So it's a light saison base. Back to that again. Finishes out really dry, and it's pretty neutral. There's a bottle of it right there. Pretty neutral base, light golden color, 4.5%. So it's a good foil for a lot of different flavors, especially with the acid component. We have that. We have our mixed culture base, which is a bit more rich. We have some more rustic character malts, like spelt, in addition to
spelt.
oats and things like that. So to contribute to the body, because it's going to see a lot more extended aging than Petite Golden Sour has. So we have those. We have a red base. We're working on a black base based on James's homebrew recipe. So those are it.
So when it
primarily.
comes to formulating those base recipes, which you are, for the most part, what you're brewing those for is going to be a palette to put other things on.
Sure.
What are your considerations in how you want them to come out? You're making like a utility beer basically that can be used for a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
What are you aiming for in terms of ABV and bitterness and body and that kind of thing?
I typically like to target low ABV, super dry, kind of light to medium body, because you can always build structure back in with additions, spices, hops, even some tannic fruit. I'm blanking on the fruit that's like wine, grapes, but not. Don't worry about it. It'll come to me.
It's not in your book of notes?
I had 2 margaritas before I came here. So, yeah, we dryness, drinkability, and low alcohol are like my 3 main considerations.
And you feel like that just makes it easy to add things and move around on it without worrying about the base beer stepping on it.
Sure.
But there's still something substantial under there because your beers are strong flavored because of the souring and that kind of thing.
Totally.
So it allows it to come through but not drown out what you're putting on top of it.
Yeah, and if if it requires it, we will build a beer from the base up. Like a cup of beer is not any of our bases. That's a different recipe. We do Suspicious Delicious, which is a tart amber saison.
That's so good.
That's
I
also
love that beer. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we didn't bring any of that. But we made that one into a pie beer afterwards because it has a lot of those cranberry characteristics. Do you have classified, Lester?
No, but I can see where that would come.
Still
Yeah.
good. It's apricot, peach, cinnamon, and vanilla with our tart amber saison. So, there is a place for building something from the ground up if you need to emphasize something or de-emphasize something. So.
And see, I think that's where you're going with this too. Is like, when you guys started, you had your bases that you worked and you really refined down, and then you really started to expand a lot on those base beers, as you went. And I think that for a lot of homebrewers, that's something that we would want to explore with this, because if you've got a great beer to start with and it's a good beer, explore your options about what you could add to it. Like, tonight we're talking about a lot of additions. You guys started with fruit. And wood aging and things up front, but then you went out and really expanded out there to where you could go with it.
Give it to Mike.
And I think that's one of those things that if you got to find that base recipe, start with that, go from that point, find what you want to add to it that's going to complement that recipe, right? Like you have everything that you said about the Petite Golden Sour. It really there are a lot of things can complement that beer. There's a lot going on with that. But someone may have, a lot of times the easy stuff is something like a blonde or a cream ale or things like that
Right.
you can kind of you can step on the initial character because there's not a whole lot of it. The Petite Golden Sour has a lot of character. And yet you find other things that just go right with it, and that blend well. And I think that's really a key to adding anything to a beer, especially fruit and whatnot. So.
I think the key on that one is the fact it's a very simple beer, but the sour profile of it is what gives it its depth, and I think that's what helps it round out anything that any of the fruits that you guys have put in it.
Thank you. That nowadays we kind of start from a concept. A lot of what we do is sit around, we make fun of each other, we tell jokes, and then out of that conversation comes some sort of stupid idea, and we work backwards. So if it's back to Petite Golden Sour, we have that tool in our tool belt,
right?
But earlier in the life of the brewery, learning how to use Petite Golden Sour well got us good at doing all the stupid shit with ramen noodles and other things. So,
well, I feel like I do the same thing. I get people tell me, can you make a beer with fill in the blank, some random candy or something, and I think
gummy
back
bears,
at
that gummy bear beer is
and
freaking awesome though.
and I think about I kind of have a handful of recipes that I've done before and I know what their characters are. And I do the same thing. I work backwards and go, okay, well, if I did this and this and this, it's going to round out these things. So that's a really good way to work at it. If you've got a handful of recipes that you've done.
You can even tweak some bases. We've tweaked Petite Golden to do other things. Like Tropsicle is kind of a tweak on our Brett Milkshake IPA. And it provides a good acidity, good platform for hops and a little bit of fruit. So tweaking something you already know how to make is a really good way to kind of work into that as well.
Because you already understand it all the way out from the beginning to the end, and you know where you can change it, and it's not going to fundamentally ruin the beer.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and you guys have always, I tell that, I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. That's what we've done. We said that in a million episodes, is make sure when you're brewing something with some of this weird ingredients, make sure you have a good base beer first. You may have to tweak your base beer a little bit in order to support the platform of whatever you're using in it. But I think it's always a good thing to do is actually have a proven recipe that you can use and maybe deviate a little bit from and change it up in order to support some of these special ingredients.
Right, and I think that's how some of us have taken the little challenge, the spice challenge beers. Is there's some funky stuff that we got, and it helps knowing that you have some tools to use that you can throw those weird spices into, and that's what I'm doing with mine.
Starting with one that you have that you know.
Right. I'm starting with a recipe. It's actually James Trimble's recipe. And I've tweaked it, and I'm going to add the chicory, and then I've got a Berliner Weiss recipe. Then I'm going to do the tangerine and the lemon juice powder with.
Right.
So I'm taking established recipes and tweaking them appropriately for what I know they contribute, and what I'm hoping to contribute from the spices. So.
And then, of course, on the other side of this is don't be afraid to completely branch out and do something absolutely new when you have a good concept of a base to work from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, because you guys have been doing variations on things for a while, and I know all of us do beers that we've nailed down, more or less. You know, we have some good concept of how this is going to work if I do it a certain way. But when I want to add in 3 new elements to it, you know, I've never made... maybe I made some good IPAs and I have a good concept of what maybe a New England IPA type of thing is, but I'm decided I'm going to go ahead and make a New England IPA that has the lactose and the vanilla and some extra fruit character to it to go with the milkshake IPA. And then you guys do something like that and it's got bread in it. You know, that's another angle of what's being added with flavor characteristics to it. You know, and I think that it's always about knowing where you're starting with these beers when you make additions, and not just, it's like we get a lot of new brewers that start out with saying, I want to make this, and it's got 35 things going on.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't do that. Why don't you start with the thing that's the base of all of that, and then work from there and add one at a time.
Get to know your process.
Right.
So let's take a little bit of a step back here, because a lot of what you guys do, you work with fruits in a lot of what you do, and that fruit is a common thing for a home brewer to be able to use and be successful with it too. But I'm sure you've learned some lessons over the last few years as to what works well and what doesn't, what kind of things you want to stay away from, and what kind of things are easier and more forgiving to work with. So when it comes to fruit, what's kind of, where have you landed on that?
We kind of started, we definitely started using Oregon fruit products because they were aseptic. You know, we didn't have to worry about what kind of wild yeast character we were going to get to alter the base, especially with Petite Golden Sour, that being such like a delicate base. It's easy to throw off with some wild yeast character. So, you know, they're packaged well. They do make, especially now, a wide variety of fruits, especially like seasonal ingredients. We've gotten our hands on some like tangerine puree and stuff lately, and we still use it. So it's a good way to kind of get into fruiting beer, because there's not a whole lot to worry about.
Right.
All you got to worry about is like your rate.
Yeah. And for you homebrewers out there, that the puree that we carry in the store, I think it's called Vintner's Harvest or something like that.
It's the same product, isn't it?
It's made by the same company.
I remember using that in homebrew stuff, and it seemed like it was the exact same thing.
It's made by Oregon Fruit Products.
Okay, because I know on their webpage when we go there to buy the fruits, it says there's like homebrew side and commercial side, and
Right.
I could have sworn Vintner is what it says when you go to the
it's
homebrew
like
side.
Vintner's Reserve or
Good
something.
stuff.
Vintner's Harvest
it
or
works really
something like
well.
that. Yeah.
We've used that stuff religiously at our place and never had a problem with it.
So is that what you're doing pretty much all the time with fruit, is purees?
I'd say most of the time, you know, like with Tropsicle or something that's going to be a quicker turnaround, you know, helps us keep the costs down. It's easy to work with. You know, there's not a whole lot of processing that we have
there's
to do.
an evenness to it as well for fermentation and whatnot, that when you get that much of a puree into solution versus, say, a bunch of whole fruit that could be a bunch of different sizes and whatnot, you
Right.
don't know what's happening with that and how much extra water's in it. And,
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we've talked about that with Iron Mash before, that, you know, you can't give every team a 5-pound bag of apples, because, you know, each team might not end up with 5 pounds of usable apples or whatever the fruit may be.
Right.
But if you give them a can of the fruit puree, every bit of that puree is usable.
Or a juice.
Or
I know
juice,
one
you know.
team at least that would end up throwing the apples though, and it's It's also there's also
Right,
that it's a lot
right.
harder to throw
I mean-
puree.
Well, it would probably hurt
It's a
more
heavier
actually.
can, yeah. But the you got to consider what.
Your face is not being seen whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's probably better for the people at home. To be honest with you.
Well, and here's the thing that you I think you gain by using the purees, especially in the can, because they are hot filled, and you don't have to worry about them having any kind of wild yeast or bacteria or
Yeah.
anything like that. So, you sanitize the outside of the can as a home brewer, and you throw it in. I think they come in aseptically packed packages pro level, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
they do. 42-pound boxes, or we can
Yeah.
buy drums or totes.
Yeah, they're
want
very
a certain amount.
for you guys out there at home. They come similar to like in a wine kit bag.
Yeah.
So
And they're really good. It allows you to dial in your rate, because that's really important to consider your base beer and what you want out of it. And that's super easy with a puree because you can actually measure it out. Whereas, we also use a lot of whole fruit. We've used peaches, most recently the Montmorency cherries from Jersey. What else?
Pears.
Pears recently.
Which we found out pears was a problem too, because much like apples, the second you start pureeing it, oxygen exposure causes problems with
Right.
putting it in sour
Oh,
beer. It
yeah.
browns out, then you put it in a sour beer, which doesn't like oxygen, and then you've got a beer that just smells like farts.
Yeah.
Fudge.
Is that what happened to that one beer you had that smelled like you crapped in a bottle?
No, that was me trying to
Okay.
figure out a way to kettle sour in a cooler mash tun thing, and it just didn't work out. And I was
That was
like,
partially revenge on me, also, if I remember correctly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, that thing smelled like there was a turd in there. I swear to God.
Oh yeah, never did that again.
If you're going to learn to brew sour beer, you better count on having a couple of turds.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
Hey, we
Or
still.
vomits.
I mean, we have beers
Vomits.
we're dumping still at our place. I
we
mean,
dump the pear beer.
yeah,
Or
that
we
we
will.
will. One of those barrels isn't any good. We're gonna have a 59-gallon barrel that's gonna be usable to make a few bottles out of. Other than that, the other one's going right down the drain.
You know what you got to do is you got to turn it into some version of like a rap video, or you have some like hipster hose that you pour it on while they twerk. You know?
Hipster hose.
But you got to spray them down with glitter first.
Yeah, there we go.
Right.
With the glitter gun, yeah. Get it up.
I imagine you probably get a lot less beer loss with purees too, right? Where there's just not a bunch of matter in the fermenter
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
takes up
Yeah,
beer.
you
It's
just got to worry about
essentially-
picking up off the pectin.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
But
I
you
mean,
will have
essentially
with
it's 5
puree.
gallons. I mean, isn't that right? It's 5 gallons basically, or
Yeah.
4 gallons?
It's a shade under 5.
Yeah. So I mean, for the amount of fruit we're putting in there, what we're getting flavor wise, it's really the best thing for it. We've done a few other ones. We did like honeydew melon,
Yeah.
and we did peaches. We've pureed a few other things, but
Cherries, we do.
Did you
zest.
skin the peaches or just
all the
put them
time.
in cut?
oh
Frozen
no,
cut. No pits. Couple
Frozen,
spoons.
whole? What?
Whole from Hutton's Peach Farm over in Weatherford.
Yeah.
he brought him back.
Got
We immediately started working on him.
It
Like
took
it
us
was
7 hours for.
Any
650.
concerns about what comes on the skin with that? See, that's something that, like, when people get a lot of fresh fruit,
Yeah.
you should be concerned about what comes on the skin if you're not doing something else to it in
Totally.
advance, So.
Yeah, and that was something that passed through our mind, but I figured we might get lucky.
For
And
you
it-
especially. Now, a guy that's making a clean, straightforward, blonde ale or something like that.
oh yeah, for
If
sure.
it
That's
shows
a
up with
different
some
thing.
Brett, that's definitely coming in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, too. Yeah, we're also putting ours in a beer that's a pH of roughly a 3.
Right.
So
right.
there's not a lot that's already going to live in that. It's
Yeah.
just kind of. I mean, it's more off flavors as opposed to more yeast thing. Like it would be more about the fact that we had, again, like I said, oxygen exposure to something, or
Right.
it'd be a little bit different.
Totally.
Are there any things that you've worked with that you've decided you don't want to mess with again?
Coconut,
You mentioned that earlier.
Glitter.
Coconut.
glitter.
Glitter, yeah.
No,
Sweatpants.
We're still, we'll consider everything, and the way I look at it is, if we have a lot of loss, if the project's exciting enough, or if we're gonna learn something new out of it, I would rather take the loss, and have a little bit less beer, learn something, or produce something really cool and exciting. But I guess we're done with coconut, so.
Well, yeah. But
I mean, we still have 2 boxes in there. I'm assuming we're going to use it eventually. I just don't want to put it into a fermenter loose again. That's all.
We'll just get bigger bags.
Well, that's the thing, though. You learn from that first round. It's the same thing that anybody at home would do. It's like you're going to learn from that first round about what does and doesn't work, and then try to improve upon that the next time. Because there was something worth saving, you're going to try to do that again, you know.
Yeah.
So
And all those considerations, like, don't even just tie into coconut. Like, I made a batch of tapache the other day, which is like a wild fermented pineapple soft drink made with brown sugar, habaneros, pink peppercorns, whole like pineapple with the skin on, so you get the yeast, and it just fermented in a 55-gallon drum that we were gonna blend it with Petit Golden Sour. And after a few days, it started showing some off flavors. So we were thinking, like, all right, how can we get all those flavors, just straight into the beer without having to make a separate beverage that might go awry, and then, you know, blend it back, you know. So we use a lot of that experience with the coconut and some of even the glitter and some of these other considerations of how we get from concept to, you know, a beer in the keg with using all those same
Hope it
ingredients.
didn't break my screen. Just dropped my phone.
So
well, yeah, see, that's something that like you just said, you know, you try some things, and that's really what a lot of times I think you're going to have to go through, especially as a home brewer, is that you're going to make mistakes. There are things that aren't going to work. You're going to have some things that fail, but go forward with that, you know. So, what? Oh,
Also, too. I mean,
He's really
there's also
enjoying that.
different.
that's a good image of me right there,
is
just
really
locked
good,
up
though.
right now.
There is also different
Drinking.
times that we've talked about using fruit before. Like that's another thing is, I mean, coconut right now we're discussing possibly using it like whirlpool even just to keep it out of the fermenter. And then you got to worry about oils and stuff like that and head retention for
right,
the beer you're getting.
which definitely happens.
The beer we just poured you just now was Whiskey Mango Petit Golden Sour. That one we fermented the PGS, the Petit Golden Sour, in whiskey barrels. We didn't add the fruit until after it came out of the whiskey barrel. So
Right.
a lot of times we're using fruit like post everything just to give flavor.
See,
Other
there's
time we want to
something-
use it when it ferments, where it's going to help boost gravity even, where we take that in consideration when Ryan designs the beers. We're looking at the idea of, okay, well, we're starting with a 3.5. We add it during fermentation. The yeast is in there to eat it. It's definitely going to raise gravity. That's what happened with Tropsicle. It went in thinking it was going to be a 4.5. It came out of 5.3 because we threw the guava
Right.
and the apricot or grapefruit during fermentation. So
Because you are adding fruit sugar. I mean,
yeah,
there's
it's
fructose in
gonna
that,
it kicks
yeah.
it back off and it jumps in Play-Doh, and then you've got more alcohol, more fruit flavor, just everything. So it just depends. I mean, we like to add a lot of the fruit when the yeast is alive and ready to chew on that and break it down and kind of give more of the flavor without giving it an overall sweetness. Now I say that, but the raspberry, blackberry, vanilla juice stand you guys had, that was strictly adding juice to a finished beer and then just kegging it right up. Like
Right.
that's all about the juicy sweetness and everything about that.
Well, generally, the earlier that you add it too, if you're adding it during active fermentation, you're going to lose some flavor, and it's going to blend a little bit more into the beer than if you add it later on. The more the sugar ferments away, let's face it, the flavor from the fruit comes from sugar most of the time.
yeah,
So,
especially when you're using puree versus whole fruit.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
right.
You know, that tannin to be left behind to give you that skin flavor.
And there's a lot. I think there's a lot less overall water character as far as a puree goes versus, say, a piece of whole fruit, where
Yeah.
it's a much more variable concept of how much water is actually in that piece versus the puree, which is pretty consistent across the board. I mean, they've worked on this for a reason. They've done what they've done to it.
Yeah.
It's consistent, and that's really why you want to work with the puree more than the whole fruit.
I'll tell you this though, when we did the peach folk, the one that we were talking about, where we did the whole peaches, that peach flavoring on that, I mean, as far as it went, like it was, you could taste peach skins inside that whole thing, and not just like a candied peach fruit. It was a different complexity to the beer though. Like that was one of the things that I liked most about going with whole fruit was there's just an extra layer of
the complexity, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it just, you could smell peach skins and you could taste peach skins on top of tasting any kind of a canned fruit.
Be less regional, or more regional too, if you had that.
Yes.
Creep. We've also done frozen whole fruit most recently with these two guys over here, our Doomberry and. So Doomberry is interesting. It's a blend of raspberry PGS, which is a puree beer, So lots and lots and lots of raspberry puree into petite golden sour, and then we blended it with our mixed culture golden sour Woodfolk, and then we added 800 pounds of frozen Montmorency cherries from New Jersey.
800 pounds?
800 pounds.
My gosh.
To a 10-barrel batch.
To one keg.
To one, yeah. Zane had to clean it. Sorry.
Anybody else want some? Because I'm going to drink it all. I love this beer.
This is actually a blend. Give it to Greg first. That's a blend of a puree beer and a whole fruit beer. So and,
the cherries and
Wow.
the sugary from the cherries kind of rounds out the sourness and tames it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, we have James Lalonde walking in. I said your name right this time.
Oh, God. Everyone watch your nipples.
You know he's going for those handfuls you got over there, dude. Only guy I've ever known you can see his nipples through his jacket.
Yeah, that's true. Also, that
I'm
beer
just
is,
always excited.
is fucking
Yeah,
great.
well, there's something to be said for that.
Hey, handsome.
So the
yeah.
cherries
Raging
have always
Cajun.
been a tricky one for me to work with because they start to take on a NyQuil flavor if you're not careful. It can be an
Yeah.
overpowering kind of sweet flavor.
that's why
When it
we
gets in there.
avoided it for so long,
Mhm.
and then got a really good, solid, cheap source of not cheap, but a reasonably priced source for Montmorency cherries. I couldn't pass it up. So, yeah, this was the first in our
It's good.
Tears of Wood series.
Yeah.
So we're doing after this, we can open up Shadow Walker, which is the second use of those cherries and the puree. We just emptied the tank, left the cherries there, filled it up with just our mixed culture base, and then we have a third one that's still aging right now. That's 1,600 pounds of cherries on the same amount of wort as before. So we thought
This is
we'd
good.
go for cherry wine, I guess.
Works.
Go big or go home, right?
So
Let's
one of
go.
the other things we should mention too is that all of our California listeners out
No.
This is David Clark with New Maine Brewing Company.
Oh yeah.
David.
Come and brew it.
What happened?
I don't know. That was Eric's deal.
He was away from the computer when that happened.
there, I think it was David Clark that did that.
Sorry.
But
in on
all
you
of our
guys.
California listeners, or not all of them, but some of our California listeners can look forward to having your beer in their market soon, right?
Yes.
And
already.
Well, they can actually already
Yeah,
get
they
it.
have.
It's already there? Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was there last week. We did a part of their Fooders with Friends. Let me back up and see who we collaborated with. The brewery, Brewery Taru specifically. I was out in California with Jeremy Grinke, their head of funky operations.
Sour Jesus.
Sour Jesus. It's sour_Jesus on Instagram. And we made a grisette.
Nice.
Because that's like the most off the rails thing for us now is to brew like traditional styles of beer. So
hard.
Yeah. And we tasted it. It was fantastic. It's aged with calendula flowers and orange blossom. So it's like this got this nice light chalky acidity, chalky in a good way.
Where did you get orange blossoms?
Where did we get
They
them?
got them. We have no idea.
Really?
Yeah,
We get
they,
them
they
sometimes.
sourced them. They sourced a metric
Brand-
buttload of them.
Brandon's really, really like close to the heart with the orange blossom. He makes a
It
fantastic
is
orange blossom
California.
with
Well,
it.
yeah, but I've always been told you'll never get enough of them to do a commercial batch because orange growers won't let you take the blossoms. That's like an orange they're giving you.
I'd imagine it's easier for a brewery in California to at least get that
California,
than
yeah.
we would here.
To go
That's the only thing
steal
I would
it.
assume.
It'd be easier for him to steal it.
He's
but-
sour Jesus. I'm sure
Maybe
he can
they
do
did
whatever.
that.
They get things. I mean, they just brewed with pickpole wine grapes recently, and those are like impossible for anybody.
Didn't they
to get
also
to, so
brew
they
with
can
like
get any-
Buddha's hands and stuff? Like some really weird things. That...
We can get Buddha's hands. I got enough pull for that
I like that. We can get Buddha's hands.
Then why haven't we made a Buddha's hand beer?
because I'm cheap. Just kidding.
Oh, is that why we don't have any dragon fruit beer either?
All right, James.
Oh.
Don't worry,
Getting
I got a
deeper.
lock on a link for Tears of a Pagan God.
There's got to be a lot of memes coming out of that camera right there.
Well, I just got to say that it's official that Greg, you and Brandon both broke the cameras. So
Yeah, well,
Can't get
I'm
those.
surprised that.
So it's just me and Ryan tonight. That's awesome. Hey, buddy.
oh, I still got the reflection here.
Oh, what? So it's the three bald guys on the side of the table who get
We got to do Mikey versus
power.
Mikey.
the
again.
bald table.
The light's working it.
Bald is.
So let's talk a little bit more about when you're getting into non-traditional additions. You know, we're talking about Peeps and glitter and ramen and Kool-Aid, pickle
Buddha's
juice,
hands
cereal, all the Buddha's hands and durian and all that stuff.
God, I want to make a durian beer so bad.
So how do you approach something like that? That's more of an unknown. Peeps would be a good example. Like,
Sure.
you don't have anything to go
Yeah, the
on
peep
with
thing, when you came from that, you're looking at these packs and thinking about how much sugar is in each one of those. And I mean, did that concern you, or were you just like, whatever happens, happens?
We actually made. So I figured it was fairly simple. People made marshmallow beers. It's just
Right.
marshmallow beer or marshmallows with sugar on the outside. So,
Right.
looked at the grams of sugar on the label, and then we actually made a syrup out of them, and then used our refractometer to measure the gravity of the syrup. So yeah.
Was
And
there
then
no
we ended up in
concerns that
Walmart
some of
again.
the preservatives and chemicals and that kind of thing that they put in those would have any type of effect on fermentation? Or
No, that got brought up on one of the Facebook hate groups, and I did the math because it's like it would have wound up being like 0.0025% of the total batch at that point.
I saw some of the same thing when I did the gummy bear beer. People are like, "Oh,
Right.
gummy bears are full of preservatives," and I'm like, actually, they're really not. It's sugar and gelatin.
Well,
Well,
sugar
but like
doesn't
you-
have a whole lot of. I mean, sugar's kind of a preservative on its own. So
Right.
Totally.
well,
Plus
but
you add
there's
it to
all
the
kinds
boil.
of chemicals and stuff in those. And like you did the
Yeah.
Skittle beer, we did the Red Hots beer that one year
Oh,
for
yeah, yeah,
Iron
yeah.
Mash, and
Oh,
I
that
was
was-
worried about it then.
Mhm.
You know, because we put that in prior to fermentation. Now, I've never heard of it being an issue, but you never know.
Yeah.
I think anytime you do something like that, you're going to get a group of people that are going to say, "Oh, that can't be done because of this random preservative that's in there, that's in such a small percentage that it's just not going to affect
Well,
it."
you know
But-
why?
Yeah.
Because
We're
of the
gonna hate.
internet.
Yeah, it's 'cause
Also,
of the internet.
too,
Because the internet. Yeah.
we have this thing in our back pocket that we like to call, which is our house yeast. It's called Brettanomyces. We're pretty convinced that thing will do whatever it needs to do to ferment
It'll eat
and everything. Yeah, we don't use sacro yeast, so yeah.
But do your due diligence if you're worried about something like that. Most packages, like if you're using Peeps, for example, it'll list the preservatives, and to make it safe for human consumption, they have to reduce those down to a safe level. So they'll tell you the percentage on the back of in the nutrition facts. It was like less than 1% of total ingredients are these all the preservatives. So then I did the math of like, okay, that's less than 1%. So I call it a 1% of this volume, which was 5% of the total batch. So, running that math all the way down, you wind up this tiny number. I was like,
Right.
hey, yeah, that's got to be safe.
Right.
If you can eat it, it should be safe for your beer. So.
Well, that's what you just said about a lot of the addition part of that is doing the math behind the amounts that you're adding to something to find out what you need in the first place. I think is what a lot of people don't consider when they do make additions to beer.
Do you do a lot of like dosing beforehand, maybe pulling off a beer and putting some pickle juice in it and getting an idea, well, this is what it's going to taste like, this is how it's going to blend in? Or I mean, shit, I've been there before when y'all are drinking pickle juice and whiskey out on the back dock, so I know you're...
Yeah. We
That
do
sounds-
some dosing. Like lots of the time, if we know it's going to be a light tart beer, we'll just pull PGS out, and we'll try and dissolve something in it. Like with the butterfly pea flour that we used, we used Funky Thunder. We use a lot of our existing beers to test infusion.
Some things are different in different pH levels too. So if we're looking at it at a 4.2 pH in our Funky Thunder as opposed to a 3.0 in our PGS, some things are different.
Yeah,
so
like
we
you
try.
could take a concrete block and put it in PGS, and it'll dissolve eventually.
Oh
Right?
yeah,
It's-
but I mean,
Shine a penny.
yeah, we've had a few things where literally we've put it up to our pH meter, and the pH meter just says it doesn't read out of function, and it's below a 2.8, and we're going, maybe this is not drinkable.
We should blend this back.
We should blend this back with something. The acidity definitely got a little out of control.
Yeah.
apparently whenever cranberries are already acidic and you put it in a more acidic beer and then you just have an acid bomb and then you're like, maybe we should dial this back a little bit.
But that's a good point. Like you were making about like the trying things in fusion. Just take something you can measure and use that to figure out a direction to head.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
we
that'll
talk
help
a
you
lot
figure
about
out
that on
other
there
things.
doing beer math, where if you want to add coffee to a beer, take a beer and add a measured amount of coffee to a measured amount of beer and get an appreciation for what it does at
Exactly.
different
Yeah, because
levels.
I was listening to your podcast a couple weeks ago with the Turning Point guys, and he was Mike, right, was talking about pulling off like what 0.25 mils of something of lactic acid to add back to a growler worth of. I was like, man, he is really getting down to 2 milliliters.
yeah. That was Mike Treadway, right?
Yeah.
And we've done a whole show with him about working that stuff out, where he actually does it by weight sometimes. But
it works.
you know, you can brew 4 batches of beer and figure out ratios, or you can do a little bit of work ahead of time and maybe get it your first time too. And then also, you know, if you didn't get it right in the brewing of the beer, you can go back afterwards and add more to it if you need to with tinctures
I was
and that kind of
I
thing.
was shocked at that beer that they had changed. He had just added lactic acid. How it changed the hop profile.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
How different it was.
Yeah, that was really. I listened to that podcast when you guys were doing that 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was really important because we just started doing our Tropsicle IPA, which is a sour IPA, and hearing him talk about how you'll get pH jumps just from dry hopping over aggressively with what they were doing.
Right.
And so we were talking about designing just a full-on big sour IPA and how much you can expect the pH to go back up as opposed to go down with the amount of dry hopping. So I the next day I actually went over to Turning Point and was drinking with him and asked him questions about it because I hadn't had that experience yet. But
Mike's the first
Curious about it.
homebrewer I've ever heard of that measures the pH of his finished beer. I had never heard of that before.
yeah, no.
It came out a little bit lower pH than we wanted. And I thought, wow, I didn't know
Whoa.
anybody even paid attention to
Yeah,
that.
at that point, who
He
cares?
got that from Alex. No, I guarantee you, he picked that one fully up from Alex when they had that discussion. He
Well, yeah.
was on top of it from that point forward.
Once I
So-
started talking about his dry hopping rates, it was like, well, no wonder you're getting pH jumps if you're dry
Yeah.
hopping that aggressively, like 5 pounds per barrel. I was like, that's just, I mean, as a sour brewery, already we don't deal a lot with hops, but then when you think about how much dry hopping that is, I was like, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard.
I thought they did 10 pounds per barrel.
Was it? I mean, he's,
They
I don't
do
know,
5
man.
or 10. Yeah.
It's insane.
I was told they make only hop beer, actually. Like, there's nothing else in it but hops. Like, you're just drinking liquid hop.
Green liquid.
Yeah.
As opposed to the post I saw where you were throwing one hop pellet into a
Single.
7-barrel batch, was it?
Yeah, exactly. You got to have your
It's a hop
hopping
beer.
ratios
You
correct.
got to have hops in there to
Legally,
call
yeah.
it beer, right? Yeah.
It's all about the hop ratio.
The collective Grew It project.
So
Well-
where do you find it the easiest to add in some of these exotic ingredients? Is the boil a safe place to add something like peeps and that kind of thing that you're not, just to make sure that
Yeah.
it's
So you
perfectly
can
sanitary
pasteurize it.
and it gets completely
Yeah.
homogeneous and all that?
Yeah, Peeps went into the boils, woody ingredients, spices and things like that need more aggressive liquid contact with temperature.
Right.
Are a good place, put them in the boil. But we do things like teas and other things into fermentation. Give it to those guys.
I think you have to think about what is the ingredient, what is the consistency of the ingredient, and then what are you trying to get out of the ingredient, and then how that's going to relate to how you use it. So like you said, peeps, they're not going to do anything if you throw a peep in secondary. It's just going to float there. Eventually it'll dissolve, but you're really not going to get, I think, what you're looking for out of the peep. Gummy bears, they're not going to do anything unless you melt them.
The Red Hots, like Brandon was talking about from Iron Mash a few years ago, we were like, it's got to go in during
Right.
boil. It's a sugar. I look at all those things as sugar
They're
additions.
sugar.
If it's sugar, then it just goes in like any other
Right.
sugar addition would in a Belgian ale. When
Absolutely.
anybody brews a Belgian ale or a saison and has ever added sugar to dry it out, that's my thought. If there's stuff you're not sure about in those products, best thing to do is just boil
boil
it.
'em.
Yeah, boil it. Last 5 minutes
Yeah.
or Whirlpool or something. Just have some heat on it. It'll dissolve right out.
And that's what I did with the gummy bears. I did a Belgian Golden Strong recipe, and instead of doing an invert sugar of any kind, I just used the gummy bears and made a syrup out of the gummy bears, and that was my sugar addition.
I mean, really, the main reason that you would want to avoid boiling something is there's some sort of aromatics that you're not
Right.
wanting to drive off.
You're right. No, but we've also
So-
tried, like, we call it, instead of dry hopping, we call it dry spicing.
Dry teeing.
Dry teeing,
Right.
yeah, like the
Tea
pineapple
bagging? Yeah.
pineapple Thai basil. The Thai
bagging,
basil
yeah.
goes in dry and post fermentation, and you get that flavor within 24 hours. It's in there. We tried doing the same thing with thyme. Thyme did not work out.
Thyme's a woody herb, so
You
that
gotta
was
boil that.
That's where we
We-
learned that lesson.
Yeah, so it's just we've tried things too. A lot of our Ryan was talking too about a lot of the testing things. We do a lot of like 5-gallon little firkins or pins, whatever you want to call them. We've made a lot of test batches out of those that eventually get scaled up because we're able to do that on a bit more of a bigger scale. I mean, we have the ability to pull 5 gallons here and there.
You
From a
don't have
beer.
the luxury of being able to do tinctures like we do as a home brewer.
No.
So
Right.
because we
No.
can add vodka into our beer in a
Yeah.
small amount, and it's
Yeah.
okay where you can't do
Cannot.
that. So
No, but being able to pull 5 gallons off and test it, that's an easy way for them to do
Yeah,
it.
like that's
Yeah.
why we
You're doing the
said
same
pickle
thing.
beer was 10 gallons total in 2 5-gallon kegs.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Right.
wasn't like we made 20 barrels of it and we put it on tap.
Yeah, the taproom manager was like, "Well, what if it doesn't work?" I was like, "Well, we'll never speak of it again. And we'll dump it down the drain."
You got 10 gallons.
No
It's
big
no big deal.
Yeah.
But
He's
if
like,
it
but-
does work, then you can do that.
Yeah.
He's like,
I
but James has put it on Instagram, so now we have to talk about it.
No, I was willing to tell people about it. Not telling it. We're not above making mistakes. That's part of the fun of brewing is figuring it out.
And being
We
a brew
made a lot.
pub.
Totally.
Yeah.
and that's one of the things I've always told
Yeah.
people about Collective. You go to Collective enough times, you're going to have something there that's not your cup of tea. But you are also going to have things that you'll never find anywhere else. And it's fun to go into a brewery that's willing to take chances on things.
All right,
And-
Jared.
Jared? Why'd you call me Jared?
Don't you remember what he said? He said to Fritz, sometimes I find that beer that's hit or miss.
Well, the hit or miss.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you're going to go in and have bad beers. You're going to have things that aren't your cup of tea.
Oh, trust
you
me,
know?
people
Like-
walk in there all the time asking for our stout, and we go, no.
Yeah. We sell bomb.
Yeah, we have bottles of beer of other people's beer that make stouts and porters and IPAs like that. We don't do that. You come into our place for saisons and sours. That's what we do.
Right. But you're gonna find creative things that you're just not gonna find at other places, and it's cool to see somebody trying things and willing to go out and take a chance on something, and maybe it'll be a home run, and maybe it'll be something you do one time and you don't do again, or more often than not, you'll go in the next time and you'll find that same thing in a little bit different variation of it, and it's kind of fun to follow the evolution of it. So if you are in the Fort Worth area, in my opinion, Collective is an absolute
have to.
cannot miss. You
Yeah, it's
have
a
to go
have
to
to stop.
Collective.
Well, and that's what's really cool about Fort Worth now is, especially where you guys are at, man. It's like that's becoming like the brew hub over there. You got
Yes, it is.
and I think that's really in the future is going to be huge for all of you guys over there, because I look at it as a beer fan or aficionado. What I look at when I go to a different town, I'm going to go to the place that has all the beers or breweries I can hit in one area, and not have to go very far. So
Right.
I think
Yeah,
for
oh,
beer,
yeah.
beer tourism, that's going to be huge for everybody over there.
I was impressed with Asheville, North
Yeah,
Carolina.
North
Yeah, when
Carolina.
we went there because it was more breweries than Starbucks for the first time in my life. I actually had more places to go drink beer than drink coffee,
Yeah.
and it was awesome.
From us to Hop Fusion to RAR is a 1 mile loop. And
Yeah.
And pretty
it's
soon
easy.
we'll have Funky Picnic over there
Yep.
too, right down the
Yeah.
street. Which
Yeah.
I
I'm
think
really
they
looking
said,
forward to.
I read today, I think in one article that there's going to be 7 breweries within a 3-mile radius. So
with a great amount of variety
Yeah,
too. Between
with like
the-
Wild Acre and
Yeah.
and I guess Martin House being on the other
Yeah.
side of it. But yeah,
yeah, it's everybody's doing their own thing, so it's you really have a unique experience at each one of those breweries. You're all doing something really well, but it's really not similar at all to what the other guys in the area are doing. It's
Yeah.
great. You can go there and have 3 or 4 totally different experiences.
You
so.
can go with a mixed crowd of drinkers too. I know a lot
Yeah,
of people
you're right.
like you get the beginner craft beer person, and they do really well at like RAR because they've got some super well crafted, approachable beers that are good for all crowds. And then you can go to Hop Fusion and get like these wonderful stouts and all the other things they're doing. And then you can take your more adventurous drinkers to our place. So there's something for everybody within real close community. So.
All right, well, it's
Absolutely.
time for us to take a break. We've got
Yeah.
our phone guest coming up next in about 10 minutes.
You
here,
guys are going to
so-
stick around, right?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe not James.
That was a guilt
yeah,
trip for
sure,
James.
sure. I mean, there's more beer to drink here, right? Like,
oh my God, we got so much beer.
I
Yeah,
can't wait
so-
to hear Zane's question for the phone guest.
Oh yeah,
Just
that'll
one-
be good.
It should be good.
God.
We will. We also, if we
Only
can,
imagine.
we might come back to the packaging part of the discussion because we got a bunch of saisons sitting around that we
Yeah.
just wanted to force on these guys. So we'll see.
You know, it might
Please
be.
do.
It might be
mean-
better, Greg, to actually just drink them at the break. That way,
That's true.
Oh,
we can just kind of
I
hit
mean,
on it.
I've got more bottles of sour here too. I mean, there's
We still have an interview
two
to
more
conduct,
bottles
man.
of sour. You guys don't want more
I
sour?
made so many notes for this.
All right, well, let's go to break.
Yes, I want sour.
Y'all listen to the sounds of the many-colored death, and we'll be back very soon to interview Josh Noel.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Noel.